Welcome to Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Bobbi Pominville, and I'm your reporter on the arts. And I have a guest today who I recently met and enjoyed singing with a bit. And of course, she's a soloist because her name is Mary Schneider, and she is a vocalist, trained vocalist, right up my alley, I say, just exactly what I love to talk about because that's been my whole life. And so I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
I'm so glad I met you and we were performing together. And I'll get to that later. But let's go way back to your younger years when you started to sing. And how did that affect you? Did you like it? And how did you feel about singing?
Sure. So I was one of those persons who has been singing since they were preschool, really, and also dancing. It always came very natural to me to be a performing artist. And so I was always in choir from preschool onward. And I never thought for a minute that I wouldn't sing in some capacity. It wasn't until high school that I decided to major in music. And so I have a degree in vocal performance, a Bachelor of Music, and then I actually also double majored in elementary education. So, you know, I've done a number of different things in my life, but that's always been a constant. I think for me, I can't imagine not expressing myself through those means.
Oh, and you do it so beautifully, and I'll bring that up later about hearing you sing.
Thank you.
At that venue we were at together. Now, I know this goes back pretty far, but you could take it forward if you want to. I wanted to know when you realized you were a soprano. Obviously, that was pretty early on. And then how did that affect your singing going forward?
Yeah, so, you know, being a fellow singer, you understand this. It is pretty interesting how you kind of come into your own voice. I started taking lessons formally when I believe I was 15 years old. I went to Minnehaha Academy in Minneapolis, and they have an amazing program for musicians of all sorts, an amazing choir. And I had a really great teacher, and I had really good, strong technical basis when I was that age. So I did sing alto for a while, not because I didn't have the range to sing soprano, but because I thought alto was a lot more interesting to sing the harmonies. And I loved the challenge of sight reading, and it just was more interesting to me. Then I think they needed a strong soprano or something, and so maybe my sophomore year or something, I was switched to soprano. But of course, once you get to college and you begin to study vocal for a vocal degree, you learn a lot about FOC, of the voice and what your voice type might be. I come from a school of thought that is wanting to be fairly open-minded about that. I think it can be limiting if you say, no, I'm only a lyric, I only sing this rep. Of course, there is the danger of singing rep that's wrong for you, and that wouldn't be wise, that's right? True. I'm not a Wagnerian soprano. I would never pretend to be. So there's that. But I also think it's really important, especially when you're a young singer, to not limit yourself, you know? And so I would say I am a lighter lyric, not the lightest, soprano, but I do have a pretty strong chest voice as well, because I've done a lot of musical theater. So I would say my range is like a low E to an F6, which is pretty broad. And I have a lot of flexibility on the top, but I am also aware of like what rep I wouldn't sing, and that would probably be the heavier rep. So I'm most at home in like Donizetti or other bel canto or Mozart, things like that.
Oh, yes.
And I love art song, especially the French composers. So I guess I love a lot. I also, besides musical theater, I sing jazz, and so sometimes it's like, I mean, I just can't decide what I love the most when people ask. Yeah. So I'm grateful just for the various opportunities I've had to express myself.
Oh, I love that answer because, well, we talked a little bit about alto to soprano because I had that experience when I got to college. And I found out, oh, I did have a soprano voice.
Yeah.
I wasn't just singing back up to my sister anymore.
Right.
And so then, but the way you talked about that, like, you know, when you make that transition, you know, it might not be as deliberate as you would think, because I might be at a voice lesson at college and I'd be going, oh, I could vocalize up there. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I can sing up there.
Yes. Well, and that's one of the things that I love about continuing to study, which I'm an eternal student of voice. It's not like I've reached some point and I'm done. Is that I do have situations where I'm in the studio, in the practice room, wherever I am, and I have these surprises that happen and new things that I'm discovering about my voice that I never knew were there. And to me, that's really exciting. I'm sure if you're an instrumentalist, you probably experience this as well. Yeah. But it's never as if I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I in this studio still? It's so boring. I mean, yes, I have those days where I have to try and motivate myself to rehearse and practice, but I just love the idea and the fact, my experience, that I keep discovering new things about the voice. Yeah. And I really think of, if I have something that might seem like a challenge or an obstacle, like, I don't like how I'm not able to express myself here in the voice. Something seems, pushed down or repressed or something. But instead of looking at it like, oh, I'm so bad, or, why can't I get to perfection, whatever that is, I think of it as a starting point to say, oh, okay, this is interesting, to approach it with curiosity rather than condemnation, which I think sometimes we can fall prey to as perfectionist tendency artists, that elusive perfection, and sort of approach it through shaming and things like that, instead of saying with curiosity, like, oh, so because I have this challenge, it gives me the opportunity to try and overcome it. What can I do to try and release that note? What can I do to try and make it so that I sing with more ease? And to me, that's just really interesting and exciting. And I wasn't always like that. I think in college, I was more of a perfectionist, negative, I guess, person, not in general, but where I would just be so bummed when I couldn't get things just perfect. And now I realize, like, oh yeah, that's not really the focus. It's not really the point. I mean, you want to do the best you can technically, and with as much excellence as you can. Of course, that's a given. Yeah. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about approaching something with curiosity in order to try to achieve something better, rather than approaching it from a negative standpoint, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I went through that perfectionist thing myself. Yeah. And it wasn't quite my voice.
Okay.
And I had to learn a lot from that too, but you don't want to get too down on yourself, because then you can't move forward.
No.
So you've got to get to a place where you could say, I'll try something else. I do this better. Let's try some vocal exercises. Yeah. And so you and I were talking about voice and lessons and how we motivate ourselves. And I love what you said to me. It's all about wellness.
Yeah. So as we were talking about before, I am just really into wellness. I just really dig it. I think it's so important for singers to be balanced and well-rounded in that area. And thankfully, as the years have gone by, more and more has come out about that. And singers that are at very high levels, it's not as much anymore, well, I'll use Pavarotti because everyone knows him as an example. His health was very poor, before his death. And he produced in an amazing way, regardless. But nevertheless, my point is that seems to be more of an old school mentality of, like, I don't think he was a smoker, but if you were a smoker or didn't really take care of your body, right? That's pretty much passé now, I find, in most circles. And a couple of my favorite sopranos are also hardcore marathon runners.
Ooh, yeah, impressive.
Yeah. And yogis. And so I think that is becoming a lot more mainstream, which is really exciting to me. Yeah. Because we could go on so many rabbit trails with this, but beyond the physical, which of course we could have a whole hour on that, you know.
Oh yes, it's a big subject, and unfortunately, not everybody knows about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the problem with the choir. You said you directed a choir, I directed a choir. I'm like always thinking, well, how do you get them to the level of you're singing the correct way and it's well, and you're doing it with wellness? And you could say over and over and over again, I want you all to bring your water bottles.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And they go, oh, I forgot.
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a challenge, but one quote that I heard recently that I just have been glomming onto, and I'm like, yes, this resonates with me, is to look at self-discipline as self-love. Instead of, again, you know, like a shaming, like a gripping thing, like I've got to do this, I got to make sure I fill my water bottle. To look at it as self-love. No, actually, you are honoring yourself and your body by giving it what it needs when it needs it.
That's true.
And so I'm not saying that you're going to convince all of your choristers just by saying that, but I think for me personally, it was really helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and also beyond the physical, as I was saying before, also the mental. That's enormous. If I could say anything to young singers, I would tell them, I don't want to take a percentage off the top of my head, but an enormous percentage of what you do is mental.
Yes.
So to put yourself in the best mental state you can is good work.
Yes.
It's just as important as proper technique.
I agree.
So,
totally.
And of course, as we know, mind and body are so related to one another that, you know, just as a quick example, sleep. Some people are amazing people who can get by in 6.5 hours and you know, present something amazing. I'm not one of those people. I definitely need my sleep. Yeah. And so that is just as much of a priority to me as getting in my practice time, as maintaining hydration, as getting movement, like I'm a swimmer and a dancer. And so, yeah, I'm kind of a crusader about this. I just wish people understood, like, you really have to attend to your whole self and not just look at yourself as just a robot or a machine that you can make do this or that and you will always get the same results. You know what I mean? Like, you're not a microwave. Like, you can't just press the buttons and this will come out. It's your body. Your voice is in your body, and your body has fluctuation. You know, you might not feel so well one day and you have to adjust your technique, or you might have some personal things going on and you have to adjust your mindset. So I wish I had known that as a young singer, that someone just sat me down and said, you know, it's not just about input, output. If you do this X amount of hours in the practice room, this will happen to you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
It's if you're doing it incorrectly, you could actually do damage.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
And the process is just so much more dynamic than that.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
So much so.
Yeah.
Now, you've had some experiences, I'm thinking Broadway or whatever, and tell me what happened there, and talk about mental singing, you know, because you have to be in a right age, or right frame of mind is what I'm trying to say. But what happens behind the scenes, and what is auditioning like?
Yeah. So
I mean, that's hardcore.
It is hardcore.
Yeah.
There's really nothing like it. It's unless you've gone through it, I feel like it's hard to explain exactly. But so yes, I was in New York for 11 and a half years, I believe. And I have done stuff off Broadway, and I've gone to a lot of auditions. Again, like, if there's any young singers out there, or people considering auditioning in New York and stuff, I would say the single most important things I learned was it's not necessarily about your talent. And that might seem elementary to people who have lived a few years and who know how the world works in whatever industry, right? Not just the arts.
Yeah.
But, and that might on the outset seem kind of negative, but actually I found that really helpful, because then I realized it was very freeing. It was like, oh, okay, so going into this casting or going into this audition, I can rest assured that if I'm not cast for the show, it isn't necessarily about, point blank, it's because I just wasn't good enough. I just wasn't good enough compared to whatever the other talent was that was there.
Right.
Sure, that could be the case, but it's not the default.
Yeah.
And so while that's like a bit of a harsh reality, it's also a helpful harsh reality, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I always dread that kind of thought that, oh, you're auditioning now with all these people. And, sometimes it's the loudest and almost kind of, I don't want to say the word nasal, but it's a certain kind of voice they're looking for.
Yes, that's a whole...
And you've heard it.
We could do a whole show on that one.
We could.
Yeah,
we could.
You touch on a really important... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Were you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, you touch on something that is really key, and a lot of people don't realize it.
Yeah.
So, as you mentioned and alluded to, the tide has changed as far as the types of voices that they're looking for. For sure, it's a pop sound, definitely a certain type of musical theater sound. So I would call myself, as a classically trained vocalist, someone who would be more appropriate singing musicals from the Golden Age. So Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Didn't you tell me that was your favorite?
It is my favorite.
genre?
Yeah.
Golden Age. Now tell us what that is, just in case our audience doesn't know.
So it would be just probably the musicals that your audience is most familiar with. So Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner and Loewe.
Oh, I love those.
My Fair Lady. And it's interesting. You love those. I love those. A lot of people are, I would use the word hungering for that type of repertoire to be played. So in New York City, every Broadway season, there's at least one, usually more, revival of a Golden Age musical. Like right now, I think it's Funny Girl is on.
Oh, that's big right now.
I haven't seen it, and I think it's probably
I haven't
fabulous.
either, and I know I don't know the whole script either,
Yeah.
but I'm sure it's challenging.
Yeah, no, I saw a little snippet on TV, and looks like they did an excellent job. Also, Camelot is being revived as well. So it's happening, but it's I would say a very, very small fraction of what's happening on Broadway right now. And even within those Golden Age musicals, they're not always casting classically trained voices like I have. Right. So it makes for not, I'd have to say, frankly, not that much that I can audition for that I would be chosen for my voice.
Yeah.
So, and that's just the way it is right now. Who knows if the tide will turn, but that is definitely the trend. I think something else, we could go on and on about this, but too, is that people don't realize how much there's sort of the age-old challenge between commerce and artistry, like who's calling the shots as far as who's being cast. Is it an investor or producer? Is it the artistic director? Is someone being chosen for the appropriateness of their voice and themselves for the role, or is it for a monetary reason? So that's always been a point of contention in producing art, and it's alive and well.
No, it's true. I know that the last thing I heard was on Good Morning America, and it was a young man who was cast in a musical who's brand new. And I knew the name of I knew his name because he's been in other musicals like, what's that Evan Hansen one or whatever it is.
Dear Evan Hansen.
But anyway, and he's got this fabulous voice. But then the years went by and I never heard about him.
Okay.
And I was fearful maybe he was not being chosen for anything. But
yeah.
Things like that happen. And you don't know what kind of voice they want. You and I have just a very sweet soprano, but I don't have a lot of volume. Could never do Broadway. But, there's certain music that I struggle to sing. And one time I was singing a Bach duet from a Christmas oratorio. And I had to really work on that to sing with another person and get that to coordinate.
Sure.
Yeah, but that was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
But oh well. Now, when you were singing at the Festival of Hymns, here's a beautiful moment for me was when you got up and sang an Afro-American spiritual. Mm-hmm. And I forgot the name of it.
Ain't That Good News.
Ain't that good news.
Yeah.
And you got up there with this humongous voice that just filled the whole church. And I went, wow. Because we were sitting by each other in the choir. Mm-hmm. I knew you had a big voice. But that was, and it fit the music perfectly. So whatever you were doing was just beautiful. So I do know I wonder if there's some venues out there that you could be singing at or you could be even hired for.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that I think of that I would like to create as far as projects that are a little bit more off the beaten trail. Just because from being in New York for so long, like over a decade, I was able to take in so many different performances and really amazing world-class artists. I'm so grateful for my experience there. I feel like it was an education in itself. It was a bit of a grad school, really. Mm-hmm. Anyway, all that to say, I've been able to see what I would really like to do and what I wouldn't want to do. And I really have a passion, like just to go back to what we were talking before about Golden Age, to revive that and to bring that to audiences. And as I was saying before, I think people are really hungering for it. Yeah. I saw 2 world-class classically trained artists, one who also sings what we would call legit musical theater at the New York Philharmonic. It was full to capacity, sold out, and they were singing Rodgers and Hammerstein. I'm trying to think of the rep that they had. Gloriously, unapologetically melodic, soaring, romantic.
Yeah.
And I'm sharing this all to say that this is how it felt in the audience. Everyone was just absolutely engaged and rapt and just waiting. And I think it's because as a society, as things have become so much more disjointed, as different structures in society have crumbled, people really long for truth and beauty and goodness. Yes. And that's expressed in these melodies that are just absolutely achingly gorgeous.
I know it. They are so memorable.
Yes. So anyway, I'm passionate about that. I'm also really interested in, I would love to do some sort of program where I would bring a certain historical era to life. I saw, I don't know if you know the tenor Jonas Kaufmann. He's a German tenor. No. And he did a show at Carnegie Hall, and it was basically from an album he did called Du bist, in English it's like, You Are the World to Me. And so it was like, I don't know if you know, like, Dein ist mein ganzes Herz, like, Dein ist mein ganzes Herz. Like, so all of the album was basically Berlin during the interwar years in Weimar. And so during that time, there were tenors like Jonas, that would have sounded like Jonas, who were kind of like the superstars of their day. Yeah. So they would have been in film, because film was a medium at that time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it would be comparable to like Mario Lanza maybe, or Catherine Grayson. Yeah. You know, just the ones who had these amazing classically trained voices, and they were also singing to the popular, you know, to the populace and in film. So my point is, so he had a whole album of that, and again, sold out at Carnegie Hall, and again, the audience was like, you know, just like breathing in every moment, so engaged. And so I just think, you know, why can't we do more of that, where we take a certain time period, and I thought, wouldn't this be an excellent program if it was done in a more intimate venue, maybe like sort of a cabaret. Oh yeah. And even to do some sort of theatrical, atmospheric thing about, you know, that time period in Berlin. I mean, I think he even had one of like those 1930s microphones up on stage at Carnegie Hall, which was really fun, but I also felt like this is a little awkward because it is Carnegie Hall and it's not very intimate. The acoustics are amazing, but it's not very intimate. And so, like, I think my theater mind was thinking like, ooh, there's so many things we could do with this, you know?
Yes,
And
you sound like you need to get a show together.
I do. You
You really do, and there's some venues around here.
Yeah. It's just the time and, you know.
Well, the
juggling
timing
everything
and
else.
wherewhatever.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's just so much to do.
Yeah, that would be fun.
With different rep.
All right, one more question, and that I said I was going to ask you. This sounds like part of that question.
Okay.
What are your future plans?
Yeah, so I still would love to, I don't know if I want to go back to New York permanently, but I still want to make that like partially part of the year, my residence. I'm hoping to go next month. I'm not sure if I'm willing to commit to staying there all year round just because it's, you know, I always say my standard of living, when I go to New York, my standard of living goes down, but my quality of life goes up. So there's so many wonderful things to take advantage of there, but it is costly, literally costly, and just for other reasons. So I just, there's nothing like it. I would love to go back and take advantage of opportunities there. And then, yeah, I think that even though concert rep is super fun to me, I love singing. I love singing with an orchestra. There's nothing like it.
Oh, yes.
It's just delightful.
It is.
There
That
is something that
wonderful.
will always draw me first to theater. So I think that's always my first love. And then, you know, whenever I'm in a concert setting, I do always try and incorporate some sort of theater as well, as far as like, because I believe no matter where you are and what venue, whether it's a recital hall or a cabaret or in an actual theater, you are the storyteller. You're conveying something to people, and, you know, especially in something that's live, you know, as opposed to like when it's just you and the camera guy, but when you are before a live audience, you are giving them something to experience.
Yes.
To me, that's just, I mean, there's nothing like it. I know you know this too.
Yeah.
And it's such a privilege. I feel like, wow, what an honor that I get to take this amazing repertoire, this amazing story, this amazing melody that someone wrote, and to share it with someone in real time, right? Like in real time, we're actually experiencing something together in a bit of a relationship. Yeah. So, yeah, I think whatever engagements I have or whatever venues I'm in, that's always in the forefront of my mind. Like, how can I speak to you, the audience? How can I show you this truth or this beauty, and we can engage in that way?
Yeah, and there's nothing like a live performance.
Yeah.
I mean, I get so that I wish for that more than what I have.
Truly.
So, because it elevates you to a different level.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's such fun.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, I have learned so much from you and your comments and your suggestions for voice and things that I really am into myself, and some questions I have, and thank you for answering all that about wellness and all that. And I just wish you the best in your career and wherever you go. And I do want to say that you might have to come back here after your sojourn in New York and let us know what's going on.
Sounds good. I think the St. Croix Valley is one of the most beautiful places in the Midwest. So
I do too.
Yeah.
I really do. So thank you again for coming. And I just want to tell our audience that if you wanted to get in contact with Mary or you have some venues that might work, you can contact me at the station here. And I do want to thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion of vocal music.